So, you know, it's I had for some of you guys, maybe you guys saw, maybe you guys didn't. There was a post yesterday. Well, somebody accused me of well, they tried to bully me essentially into shaming me for doing something that they shouldn't be shaming me for. I mean, I thought it was very low class of them, but if you go back to that post, you can see that there's, a lot of animosity. There's a lot of conflict still in the January 6th community. And, I think it's sad. I think I think it's sad because a lot of us we did time and I could say that there's some of the Jan Sixers that integrated that time very very well. I'm not saying I'm one of them. I'm doing my best. I'm still learning, but many did not and kind of just regressed. I think in a lot of ways it kind of made them a worse person, more entitled, more aggressive, more just not thoughtful, more tribalistic. It's just like you have to think one way, you have to think group think, and no thank you. No thank you. And I was having a conversation, it was a couple months ago with a buddy of mine who's also Jan Sixer, and he said something pretty profound and accurate. He said, Ronnie, I sat in solitary confinement with you for a year and a half. We did 4 years in prison, and you know, when I got out, I thought that I had done the inner work. I thought that I must be enlightened, right? And only now do I realize that I have a lot more work to do. And that's so frustrating because if I didn't do the work while I was in prison in solitary confinement, if that wasn't where the major heavy lifting was done, what does that mean for me in my life now? That's so accurate because the truth is the work, first off, it's not an ending path. There's not a path where it ends, right? There is only continuous growth, continuous realizations. Number one. So to see it as a end, why to see that there's an end path is just not accurate. But also, I think a lot of people didn't just think that going through a traumatic experience means putting the work in, and that's just not the case. If that were the case, everyone that had had traumatic experiences, which is many of us, many of you guys watching this have gone through something in your life that probably affected you in a very profoundly negative way. Well, this fly is really bothering me. Um, and just because you go through that doesn't mean you're enlightened at the end of the tunnel. And what is enlightenment, right? So a lot of people also misunderstand what enlightenment is. And it's, I think the truth is that going through a traumatic experience, going through an experience like that, going through solitary confinement, doing that experience, that's only the doorway. It doesn't mean you've done the work. It doesn't mean you've walked through the door. It just means you have been led to the door, and it's up to you to walk through that door. And that door is difficult, and I don't think most people are ready to really truly walk through that door, what it means to confront themselves, right? So, I saw this time and time in prison. People are going through these profoundly traumatizing experiences, from witnessing murders to solitary confinement to having to commit heinous violent crimes against other inmates in order to survive. And that takes a real negative toll on an individual. I don't care how big of a gangster you are. It takes a toll. Okay. And there is the truth is that's the easy part. The hard part is confronting yourself. The hard part is taking that mask off. What I got here. That's the hard part, right? Taking that mask off and seeing who you are underneath the mask, right? That's the hard part. I don't like people looking at my eyes. 1 second. So that means confronting who you are, confronting the lies you tell yourself, the lies that you tell other people, the harm you've done to other people, the harm you've done to yourself, intergenerational harm, the persona that you tell yourself that you are, the persona that you want people to believe you are, persona that people think you are. All these need to dissolve. And that means real confrontation with yourself. That means really saying, who am I? And really confronting the dark sides of your personality. And it's a painful realization. I mean, it's painful, right? This is not easy lifting. It's not easy work. And so most people, when they're confronted with themselves and confronted with the opportunity, because that's all it is. Trauma is an opportunity, right? It's not the journey. It's the opportunity to start the journey. Only when confronted with that opportunity. And then when they realize, oh, that means I have to like be honest with myself. And by the way, most people don't even know how to be honest with themselves because their ego is too, their mask and their ego is too so firmly planted on their face that they can't even see their own delusions, even if they wanted to. And that's the first major hurdle, is to see your own delusions. And it's hard because your mind protects yourself from looking at your own delusions. It's called um ego protective. Anyway, it's ego protect. It's pretty self-explanatory. Your ego will protect itself, right? Your ego wants to survive. Your ego wants to thrive. Your ego wants to control the ship. But when you let your ego control the ship, you're headed for disaster, my friend. You're headed. That's why our society is headed for disaster, because we're a society that is so focused on ego and money and status and clothes and all these things that are so dangerous and damaging to our souls. It's hard to rip that mask off. It's really, really hard to rip that mask off. And to those that do it, doesn't mean the journey's over. That just means you've ripped off one mask. There's probably layers of masks you have to rip off. And each one hurts more than the last. And then when you rip it off, you're just left with you. And that's when the journey actually begins. And most people never rip off their first mask, much less sit with themselves and start the path, start the initiation. So it starts with trauma, usually, almost always how it starts. Some people are blessed. They don't have to go through trauma. They're just spiritually attuned. But most of us are going to have to go through a horrible event in our life where it shatters your sense of self. It shatters your ego. And I think most people's masks are so strong, so firmly attached to them, that we're talking trauma to the point where most people couldn't even handle the trauma, let alone start the process of ego dissolving, right? Because our society is just so broken that it, and this is where ancient societies have really got it figured out. They didn't allow the ego to build up and create a crustaceous, nasty scar over ourselves. And that's what we have. We have a society that has allowed a calcification of our mass over our collective society. And the more it calcifies, the harder the masks get, the harder it is to take off, and the more traumatic it is to take off that mask. And you're not ready. I don't think most people are ready to look underneath the mask. Not just our individual masks, but the collective mask our society has. And that's even more dangerous, because our society has a collective mask that if we were to look underneath the mask, if we were to see politicians for who they really are, if we were to see religious figures for who they really are, if you were to see celebrities for who they really are, if you were to see your neighbor for who they really are, I don't know if people are prepared. We're not even prepared to look at in the mirror and be honest about who we are as individuals, much less look at around us, look at our societal rot. So what's the solution? I don't know. I do know it's going to take a major trauma, collective trauma, for us to get over it. And that's dangerous, because collective trauma is like war. It's disillusionment and our breakdown of our societies. It's hurt in a collective scale that it's most people are not prepared for. And I don't know if we would survive as a collective species if we were forced to face ourselves as a society and as a human species. I don't know if we would survive. And so that's the hard truth about this journey is it's not easy. Most people will never even start the journey. Most people that get the opportunity to start it back away from actually doing the work. And most people believe that the work is done when the work is just started. And I'm not saying that I'm enlightened. I certainly am not. I am just starting the journey, right? So imagine that sitting in solitary confinement for a year and a half, 4 years of prison, public crucifixion, where I had my own friends and family and people that I thought that loved me turn on me publicly, not privately, publicly disown me, publicly say nasty things about me, lie about me, say terrible things about me, try to get me. I had my own brother try to turn me into the feds for money. You know, I had friends who I thought were friends try to turn me into the feds to gain a bounty on me. People that would smile at my face and call me a brother. I had both of my co-defendants flip on me to save themselves as I was looking at 28 years in prison. The feds were telling me, you are going to do 28 years in prison. We are going to supersede you with more charges, and we will get the time out of you unless you cooperate, unless you flip on other Jan 6ers. And I refused to do it. But both my co-defendants had no problems. In fact, one of my co-defendants, Josiah Colt, he was the first January 6er to flip. It took him like 72 hours. 72 hours after the event, he was already like that. I'll tell you anything you need to know. It was Ronnie. It was Ronnie's fault. It's fine. You know, Josiah, he's pretty much just disappeared. You can't even find him anymore. He's got to be ashamed of himself. What a shameful, shameful boy child he was to not stand 10-toed. Ain't the grave. He at least lasted a year before he flipped on me. He's a weak man. He knows he's a weak man. That's why I'm not even mad at him. I can't be mad at another man's weakness. I can only accept it and forgive them. And I've done that. I understand because there were moments of profound weakness where I thought about flipping on other people in order to save myself. And I'm not going to lie about it and say, oh, I stood 10-toed the whole time and I didn't even have a thought. Of course I did. I mean, my own friends were telling me to cooperate. My lawyer was telling me to cooperate. There were profound moments where I was sitting in a cell. I'm like, I need to get out of here. This is the most horrible feeling I've ever felt in my life. The walls are closing in, and I have the person who I thought I was is over. That life is over. That person who I thought Ronnie Sandlin was, the internet marketer, the guy that had a business, all that stuff. That boy was dead, boy. That boy was dead. And I had to confront that and still try to hold integrity. That's why only like 4% of federal inmates don't flip. It's about 4% from the numbers. So it's like 96% of people cooperate in investigations to lower their time. And I'm proud to be of the 4% that didn't, but I know the emotional toll that it took on me and the people that decide to stand 10-toed. That is an emotional toll that most people are not prepared to face, and that's why most people flip. And that goes right back into most people are not prepared to take off their mask. Most people are not prepared to confront their ego. Most people are not prepared to confront their shadow. Most people are not prepared to go down that route, to walk into the abyss, knowing you may not walk out of the abyss. And there's very few people in this world that have gone through the abyss, survived, and walked out with a secret. And it is a secret. When you walk down into the abyss, when you walk into the underworld, when you walk with Hades and you walk with your shadow, there's gifts that you can bring back. But it's called the boon. Joseph Campbell called it the boon. In his books called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he calls it the hero's journey, where the hero first must refuse the call, which is what most people do. They refuse the call. Then they're forced into confrontation, which is, like I was forced into confrontation, not because I chose it, but also I was forced to go into the abyss without my choice at that point, right? They have to descend into hell and rise again. It's a classic story. It's the Christ story. It's the Odyssey story. It's the hero's journey. You have to confront yourself in the cave, in the abyss, in the belly of the whale, and only then and there can you come out with a secret. And the secret is so profound that I understand that I cannot nakedly tell anyone this secret without it profoundly fucking them up if they're not prepared. And so that's why the mystics talked in codes and symbols, because they understand that the knowledge that is earned in the abyss is so damaging to the average person that they have to protect the average person from the truth. Can't just speak it out nakedly, because most people are not prepared to face the truth. And I'm not saying I'm enlightened. I'm not saying I'm the one. I'm not saying I'm Neo. I'm just saying I know what the descent looks like, and I know what that truth looks like, and I know what it feels like to have that truth in my hand and not be able to tell people. Can't. Well, first off, makes me sound crazy, right? Most people, instead of saying, hey, maybe this guy has something there, and I think this guy's a nutty person. So there's that. There's also protection, right? But mostly it's not protection, but it's really that I understand that the truth found in the abyss, if I were to speak it plainly in plain English, most people are not prepared, and I would be damaging people, not helping them. That's kind of what I want to focus on my podcast. Making money a little bit, right? Because we all have to make money, but there's something, I don't know. It's interesting, huh? Let me see how the sound sounds. Let's take a look. Listen to it. Sounds pretty good. Well, tell me what you think. Go ahead and comment on the live stream. Tell me what you think. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking gobbledygook. Could be. Totally okay with that. It's often what happens is the mad prophet goes into the desert and comes back speaking in hieroglyphics and is considered the madman, John the Baptist, right? This is a tale as old as time. The man that goes into the desert, walks into the abyss, and comes back, and he's a crazy person and treated as such. It's not that he's crazy. You just can't nakedly talk truth to people that are uninitiated. You sound crazy. Something to think about, right? So I'd like to maybe help some people to integrate, teach a little bit of what I learned. I can't tell them the truth. I can only show you the door. It's up to you to walk through the door. That door is painful. I'm not going to say, I'm not here to sugarcoat things. And I'm certainly not here to lie to you and tell you that the path is easy. That is not easy. I'll be honest, you may not even survive it. Most people don't. But it's worth it. I'll tell you that much. It is worth it if you decide that this is the path. You and some people, look, there's times where I'm like, I wish I was just ignored the call, which most people do. That's the most common decision people make on the hero's journey. It's just to ignore the call. Frodo ignored Gandalf and tried to say, no, not for me. I'm not that dude. I'm not going on this mission. It's a tale as old as time. Most people refuse the initial call. And you know what? It's not that there's nothing wrong with it. It's simpler. It's easier. It's comforting. But the truth is important. Maybe not everyone needs to know the truth. Maybe I don't even know the truth. And that's the honest assessment. I could have just found something that's fool's gold. And I'm totally okay with that. And I thought about that a lot. Maybe I just have fool's gold in my hand. And then that's a learning lesson in itself as well. Maybe I don't. Something to think about, I suppose. Anyway, like I don't see any comments. Am I just talking too much in hieroglyphics at the moment? Too coded? Do I sound like a madman coming out to the outskirts of the village speaking in hieroglyphics? That could be true. That could be very true. Anyway, I'll probably just end this podcast or this live stream. I just was messing around. I got to put it back up. I want to do one last little stream and one last stream of consciousness with you fine folks. Anyway, what's my send off? Until next time, life's too short to get rich slow, ho.